good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day to all of you who are here today. Why do I wish all of you all these wonderful greetings? Because we have an audience from not only all around India, Asia, Europe, but from across the world. So from wherever you're watching us, from whichever time zone, I wish you a very warm welcome and namaste. Namaste to our Indian audience, of course, you know what that is. To our audience from outside India, in case you don't know what namaste is, it is the way we greet each other in India. It is the way that I bow down to the divinity inside you. First of all, it's a much healthier and more hygienic way of greeting each other. You don't have to shake hands. And that's so essential right now during the COVID era, but even otherwise. But what does namaste mean? It means namaha aste. I salute your existence, or I bow down to the divinity inside you. So to all the audience that we have here from across the world, I think we are already over 500 people. We are having people on Facebook as well. So for those of you who could not join in into the Zoom call, please feel free to join in on Facebook or ask your friends if they got stuck, join in on Facebook. To the audience, please feel free to put in your questions, comments, thoughts on the Q&A on Zoom or on the comment section of Facebook. We'll try to get as many questions from the panelists. The first 1 hour we'll spend is talking about the different points, and the last 15-20 minutes we'll spend taking questions from the audience. We're going to, now, why did we do this Global Education Thought Leader series? April and May, in India especially, was filled with, amongst other things, a plethora of webinars. And with these webinars, there was a viewer fatigue that started setting in. People started getting bored of hearing the same things, same problems, same negatives. And that's where the idea of this Global Education Thought Leader series was born. We are going to be focusing on solutions, experiences of how they actually happened, and key takeaways for all you educators, parents, school leaders, managements, government officials, and my favorite, the students. So very warm welcome to all of you. We, in India, the identity of India is built on the foundational blocks of its diversity. In a country where every 100 kilometers there are changes in dialect, culture, costume, and cuisine, it's an onerous task to bring consensus amongst the various stakeholders on what are the real problems, on how do you solve those problems, and third, what are the ways to go and get those solutions. Education is no different. Each school has its own identity, its own unique culture, ethos, values. The one thing unique though about the education field, about the education fraternity, is that everyone has an opinion on it. So, like when Sachin Tendulkar, the greatest cricketer, the greatest batsman of his generation, used to bat, when he came out to bat, he would have about 1 billion people giving him advice on how he should have played his shot. Education is something like that. And it's good in some aspect, as long as the feedback is constructive. Now, amongst all this diversity, the divergence in opinion, there's one thing that binds us all. Whether you're a school in Montreal, Milan, Mumbai, or Melbourne, the one thing that binds us all is the fact that all our worlds revolve around the same thing, the child, the student. While the ways to achieve the goals may be different, the fundamental aspects don't differ. We have to ensure that our children that are entrusted to us maximize their inherent potential and excel at what they are best in. To develop the values, ethos, character of our students so that they become responsible and compassionate 21st century global citizens. The other thing common about all our schools across the world is that we are all in the same boat, given the current situation. We are all struggling with the similar kind of questions and thoughts in our mind. When should we open school? If we open schools, what are the measures we should take? If we do all those measures, can we ensure that there will be 100% safety? What happens, God forbid, if a child or a parent or a teacher contracts COVID? How do you achieve socio-emotional learning? We will be delving into all of these questions and many more with my champion panel, who are absolute education thought leaders, not only of their country, but of Europe. Now, educators, like a lot of people, love certainty. Academic calendars are planned for the entire year in advance. I was speaking to this one educationist, and he told me, I can tell you in August 2022 what I have already planned and what my children are going to be doing. Schools and parents find this major sense of comfort when they are following these pre-planned paths. Yet the beauty of our world, the beauty of our lives, lies in the uncertainty. There's nothing certain about life anyways, except for the fact that we are mortal and we're all going to go one day. Yet we spend so much of our lives trying to pin down life into these boxes of certainty. And it's good. It's definitely good to be pre-planned and to be systematic and organized. I'm not against that. But equally or more important is the ability to embrace uncertainty, to understand that we don't have the power to control what's going to hit us. What we do have in our hands is the ability of how we react to those situations, how we respond to the situations. Now, all these plans that we educators made got washed away by this pandemic, COVID pandemic. I think this is the best time that we have in our lives to be able to really breathe, live and breathe the 21st century skills that we all once sagaciously foretold on the ramparts of the fanciest education conclaves of the world. And what were those 21st century skills we all spoke about? Resilience, adaptability, flexibility, the ability to cope with limited resources, to make our children problem solvers, critical thinkers, to be able to crisis management, to handle crisis management. What better time than now to be able to develop that in our students? This is the best time. Every challenge is an opportunity, but only if you make use of it. This is the opportunity we have to throw out outside the window the negativity, the fear, the over-anxiety of within us, or the belief that 2020 is a tragedy, it's an adversity, it's crisis. Yes, it is a crisis. It is adversity. But adversity has the ability and the effect of eliciting talents that lay dormant inside us during prosperous times. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is the conquest of fear. Fear is the dark room where negatives are developed. Champions are the ones who are able to conquer their fear. Champions are the ones who have the tenacity to claw out of adverse situations. So with that, I'd like to open it up to my panel of champions. My first speaker is Kathleen Agee from Finland, from Helsinki. She's the head of the International School of Helsinki. She was the chair of the Central and Eastern European Schools Association. She's an award-winning keynote, a motivational speaker focusing on innovative educational practices. And my dear audience, she's also one of the people, a principal who has recently opened a school in Helsinki. Over to you, Kathleen.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I think to build on some of the pieces you just said, that this is an opportunity for us as how we move forward with education. And I know that's a scary thought for many of you who are still in lockdown. I have now been back in school for 2 weeks now. We were ordered back in Finland May 14th. And like many of you, you're going to find that there's going to be a certain set of regulations that will happen either nationwide or locally that will affect the rollout for your community. And Mr. Podar is absolutely right. There's no necessarily known path as how we keep our families and our community safe. But what we've found in the past few weeks is that we can put in some procedures that we hope are helpful, which we'll probably talk about later today. And my big point I want to make for all of you is that there is hope once you get to the point of reopening. I was very, very worried in the beginning as to the circumstances that would feel somehow prison-like or something for students. But I can't tell you how joyful they are once they are allowed to come back in contact, even with a mask, even with social distancing, even with smaller classes, shortened classes, different schedules. There is a monumental relief when we reunite. So for wherever you are in the world, that will happen for you at some point as well. And my first message to you is that it is full of hope.
Wow, thank you, Kathleen, of the idea of hope, because there's a saying in Hindi, which says that "Umeed pe hi duniya kayam hai." What that essentially means is that the world survives on hope. And a great segue for me to take it to our next speaker, who is John Nichols. John Nichols is one of the household names in the education circles across Europe. He's currently the co-director of the bilingual European School of Milan in Italy. Italy, of course, has been ravaged by the COVID pandemic quite badly, a very high number of cases per capita as well as a high number of deaths. John was also the assistant director of leadership development across a group of 55 schools. He's had workshops across 30 countries. He was an IB in Geneva, where he's trained over 1,000 workshop leaders. John, why don't you throw some light on some of your thoughts on the opening statement?
Absolutely. So for us, the whole experience has been, as you say, it's been a tragic situation, and we were the eye of the storm of the world for a while in terms of the focus. But what it's meant for us is that it's really clarified what we believe in and what we are proud of in our school. And so when we were trying to convert to online, which we did very quickly within a couple of days, because we had the infrastructure in place, we were very clear about what we wanted the education experience of the children to be. So we strongly believe in an inquiry-based approach to education. We didn't want to then turn back to kind of basically doing worksheets or a very didactic approach to teaching. But as we kind of went through the journey, we were finding the things that we believed in, and then we translated it into a virtual reality. So we started off with 2 synchronous sessions and 1 asynchronous per day. The asynchronous ones were specialist teachers doing PE, music, art, drama, which were done via video. We then realized that we needed to then sprinkle some novelty in each week to make sure that things would get fresh. But we did that once again through the things we valued. So we valued our learning celebrations. So we've had regular learning celebrations that the children have hosted. We strongly believe in educational visits. So we started doing virtual educational visits. The first one was a visit to the fire station. That was very popular, not just with the children, but also some of our parents as well. And then we also had other aspects, that we were a bilingual school. So most of our parents were Italian, and they were concerned with supporting the English at home. So we brought in a language company from the UK to give extra English lessons, just to give the children opportunities to have conversations in English. We then realized that the children were getting tired, as were our teachers. So we then introduced Wellbeing Fridays, based on the 5 ways to well-being that is very well known. And so that's been the kind of the journey in terms of what we value. But what we also value is communication with the parents. So we're having weekly meetings with the parent reps, sharing what we're doing, asking for their concerns, and addressing what we need to do and what we don't need to do. And then around 4 weeks ago, we felt we needed to turn our community's attention to how to reopen the school in September. And we introduced what we call the 4 pillars of reopening. And they were focused on hygiene, curriculum of excellence, flexibility, and well-being of the school, of the community. And that shaped the conversation for what we're going to do now as we prepare for opening in September. So that's been our journey. So it's very positive.
And is it already decided that September is going to be the date?
Yeah, it is. So we don't know what it's going to look like, but that's why we've got flexibility as one of our pillars. But that's the plan, is to work towards that.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, John. Thank you for giving us that insight on how it's working out in Milan. My next champion panelist is Robert Thorne. He's a 29-year-old, not 29-year-old educationist, although he does look 29. He's an educationist since 29 years. That's what I meant. He's a principal at the English International School in Bratislava. He has a very strong, big focus on developing real holistic learners. So rather than just the STEM subjects or the academic subjects, the holistic learning of children is one of his key focus areas. Over to you, Robert.
Right. Well, welcome everybody. Namaste. Well, here in Bratislava, it was very interesting because we had sort of a top leadership. I'm not in the top leadership. In the top leadership sort of said, oh, this is nothing. No problem. Like many governments did around the world. However, the government took it really seriously, and the government put in really good plans, and most of the people followed the regulations. And so we had very few cases of the virus and very few deaths compared to other countries. So then then our management started to get into action, and we closed the school. I am the principal of the academy, which is for the older children. Now, the younger children, we figured out they needed some sort of certainty, and so they basically had a timetable all the way through the morning. That the teachers were there with them. It's quite intense. Their older brothers and sisters were amazed at how much time the kids were spending in front of the computer, which wasn't so good, and so that was adapted in primary to become more play-based. In secondary, we took a different approach, and because we believe that we need to take every opportunity to develop the attributes of good learners, we took this on in the same sort of way. And so, for example, teachers wrote into me and said to me how they felt that they could manage this situation, and it was good enough to be able to allow them to do it. So there were different approaches from different teachers because it was pretty immediate. And so you have to look after your teachers if you're a principal. So the first couple of weeks, everybody was doing what they understood and how they were comfortable on the technology-wise and face-to-face. We had some people who didn't want to go face-to-face, didn't want to show their faces on Zoom. They were quite particular about that. And then we got the kids to come up with their own schedule. So the teachers would say, all right, well, I'm going to have a live session here, here, and here. And then the kids had to make up their own schedules. And so we were quite strict about that. So putting in a schedule when you've got all that free time is a really important thing to do. So they came up with their own schedules. And where there were schedules with no free time and no play and no, we said, well, that's not realistic. Come on, put in your schedule the times when you're relaxing, the times when you're enjoying yourself. We had to be a little bit flexible also with the kids because the kids started to get more and more things to do from their parents. So we haven't got time for all this stuff we're supposed to be doing because the parents are giving us more things to do. So we built those things in, and we have, I think many schools have service and action and service and that sort of thing. So we brought those in. You're not technically supposed to be doing things for your parents or for yourselves, but we allowed that this time. So we relaxed the rules about service. So if they helped around the house, that was great because they're learning things from that. So it was all about, for us, it was all about getting the kids involved in constructing their time. And the feedback from the kids is, wow, we're so much more organized when we're at home. So that's great. And then going back, our primary teachers are going back on Monday. And the government has given some general guidelines. And then the senior management has modified those for our school. For example, they say 20 people in a classroom. Well, our class sizes are a bit smaller, so our rooms are a bit smaller, so we reduced that down to about 10. And then the section leaders are looking at working out how that's going to work. And then the teachers are working at how that's going to work. So these general regulations are gradually worked out to fit our school and to fit our class and then to fit the kids. So the kids, now the big thing, I'll finish here, the big thing is that this is it's a big opportunity, as John said, but it's also a big test and a big example to our teachers and our parents to say, what are the most important things that we should be teaching, we should be developing in our kids? What are the attributes that they need to cope with this situation, to being at home all this time, to be coming back to school? Are they responsible enough to actually function? And that's a big question. If they're not, then why not? So we should be teaching those things. Parents should be helping kids develop. Kids themselves should be aware of these things, developing the language in order to be able to develop these things. So these attributes like collaboration and independence and things like that. Okay, I think I went over my 6 minutes.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. Absolutely. And of course, no better learning than self-directed, self-led learning. Heuristic learning is the best learning a child can have anyways. So it would be wonderful to have kids decide their own path of how they want to have scheduling their learning day. Now to Henry. Henry believes making the internet a safer place for kids is what we should be doing. And it's true because today the kids' virtual worlds are overshadowing their real worlds. He believes in a healthier, kinder social media where children have digital citizenship, online safety, and youth empowerment. One of the interesting things about Henry is that he was an award-winning marketing lead. He then became a police sergeant, and now he's an edupreneur. So, Henry, how are things in Chester, UK?
Namaste. Thank you so much indeed for the opportunity to join you all today. Yes, things in Chester are interesting at the moment. One of the most interesting experiences for myself and for us as a family is I'm a parent. So my children are 7 and 4. In fact, Sophia is 8 in just 2 days' time. So and coming from a family of educators as well, I have very deep appreciation for everything in terms of the pedagogical mindset. You know, father was a secondary school principal and mother was an early years STEM teacher. I think the interesting thing has been seeing the shift from parents from being one of nurturing and caregiver to being at-home educationalists, and suddenly the increasing awareness of parents at times how undervalued teachers actually are within society, and how incredibly difficult the job and the role is of a teacher. And you know, seeing just in the early days of closures, the number of parents who were turning to social media and saying that every single teacher globally deserves a pay rise, because suddenly they're them realizing just how difficult, you know, it can be teaching children and empowering children. For my personal work within the closure scenario that we've had, so the work that we now do actually spans 39 different countries, and through creating Go Bubble, which is, as you very kindly mentioned, it is that safer, kinder, healthier social experience for under 13s, very much with safety at the core. We've seen an incredible transformation in terms of the engagement through schools and children during this time. What that's actually led us to be able to do is look at the barometer that's happening from a child's perspective during the closures. So actually, how are children living their lives now? What are their views for the future? How are they talking about the virus? How are they engaging with their friends? There is a natural tendency to turn to tech in terms of isolation. However, I am a massive advocate of the importance of play. And you know, for my own children, yes, there is screen time and access to screen time that they have to have for aspects of their learning. But at the same time, the learning that can come from them playing Lego or going out into the garden and building a den and engaging together is so important and so vital, and really underpins the deeper community, the deeper learning that can come from social emotional learning. And obviously, my children are very fortunate because they're siblings. There are children that we're aware of who obviously are only children, and they very much can be cut off from any kind of interaction with their friends and their peer groups. And schools have used Go Bubble really as a way to solve that problem that's presented with the safety there. So for me, one of the big things that's really come from everything which we're facing as a global pandemic at the moment, I suppose really can be underpinned by the word community, because that's the key thing for children which they miss, that sense of community with their friends, that sense of community that can come from the playground or the classroom, and how that can then underpin and enhance and amplify learning opportunities that come through from it. I thought it was really interesting hearing the opening talks, and I was just making notes as we went, because I loved some of the words that were coming out. So the words around resilience, reassessing what we value, looking at the power of communication, looking at the world of uncertainty and how we deal with that. And it's been really incredible seeing the way that children have very much stepped up to those challenges, which we've been able to see. And I think moving forward, and for me, the time that we are now encountering is a time of hope. And I think it has to be. We have to be looking forward. So it's not necessarily a case of going back to school, but it's looking forward to school. And that's for all of us involved with the wider community of education and children and child's lives. And as part of that looking forward, I think the importance on well-being is paramount. And I remember you mentioned yourself, Ms. Potter, at the start around resilience. I remember starting off the closure experience, we were actually in Dubai, working with the Dubai Future Foundation through their Dubai Future Accelerator on the future of education and deploying Go Bubble there. And I remember hearing a pedagogical lead at the time saying that the pandemic will create a legacy of mental health for children in one of two ways, and very much on the role of parents. And that will either be that children will become so fearful and the resilience will just dissipate in terms of how they will live their lives for decades to come, well beyond them fulfilling their traditional education and then higher or further education, but going on into their own future families and their own future employability, depending on how parents interact with them and how they engage with them around the virus, how they engage with them about how life is changing. But at the same time, there was a massive opportunity for parents that actually, if they explained and engaged with children in the right way and in a way which is fully customized to them as parents, that actually there was a massive opportunity there to instill resilience into their children, to help them understand about how there can be good that comes from bad, how we can connect more as a wider community, more meaningfully in terms of, with our friends and our connections that we already have, to then look at removing some of the barriers, some of the blocks that have existed before, to actually shape a new world. And that's been one of the lessons that I've really tried to carry close to my heart as a parent throughout all of this. It's just been very mindful about the language. And that's why it was so lovely to hear Kathleen talking about when opening back up and seeing the hope and the positivity that comes through for the children is wonderful. We actually, just wrapping up this first bit, I've probably gone over as well, so apologies. But we actually did a survey in Go Bubble, asking the kids just a multiple choice question about what do you miss most about school? So that was the open question we gave them. What do you miss most about school? We gave them 4 options. One was their friends. The other one was the playground. The third was having fun. And the fourth were teachers. Probably unsurprisingly, the first thing they said they all missed were their friends. And we've seen this. We've seen kids connect and share baking that they're doing at home with their friends, talking about how important friendships are. But importantly, the second aspect that came up was teachers. They actually miss the teachers more than the playground. They miss teachers more than having fun. And the role of the teacher, the role of the educator, for me, I think not just in terms of from a parent's aspect, but actually from a child's aspect, is so vital and so important and really can't be underestimated. And that's from from the children's own perspective. So thank you.
Thank you, Henry. Very, very, I can't agree with you more, especially on the fact that the power of play is something that has been untapped. Children learn best on their feet and not only on the seats. It's extremely critical that we also value the role of teachers. I know that the people who are at the front line helping, the medical professionals helping our patients going through the COVID, they are the COVID warriors, no doubt. But apart from that, our teachers are also like COVID warriors because they are going through a lot of difficulty in their own lives, but they are being there front and center to make sure that they're shaping the future of the children of the country. And no matter what happens in India, there's a lot of problem happening about fee collection for schools, and parents don't want to pay fees because they're like either they are going through a difficult time or the fact that they are maybe that they don't think that enough classes are happening. But teachers are working very hard. They're providing the online classes, synchronous as well as asynchronous. So hats off, kudos to all the educators around the world. I call you my miracle makers, and you all are the ones also who are COVID warriors in your own way. To Kathleen, I want to ask you, since you've reopened your school recently, there must have been a lot of thoughts, concerns, fear, apprehensions, both of yours, of your teachers, of your parents, of your students. How do we open? When should we open? Following the guidelines? What happens if even after following those guidelines, God forbid, somebody gets contracted with a positive case? I was seeing this report on a school in Incheon in South Korea, which opened, and in a nearby nightclub, a 29-year-old boy contracted COVID, and they shut that whole district down and shut then the schools down. So how do we, if we reopen schools, how do we keep them sustainably open?
Yep. I think it's a very good question. And actually, since schools reopened here in Finland, there have been 6 different schools where a partial quarantine was put on the school. So we're at the point in Finland where we're getting closer to doing better at contact tracing and understanding how we go about communicating to those who might be in surrounding somebody who might have had COVID. So one of the trends that you may find in your schools or where you do next is that many of the schools are being asked to contain the number of students to an area of the school for most of the day. So before, students would move from place to place, from classroom to classroom. Like I believe John was talking about, we reduced, or maybe it was Robert, we reduced our class sizes to groups of 10, and we know this is not long-term sustainable, but it's a piece now, and that we put them in a certain part of the building, and we're controlling the movement on that floor of the building and how people are interacting in that way. So if, for example, we were to get a case, then we would have a very clear idea as who would be the individuals who were in long-term contact with that particular case, so that we can continue on with school if it were the case, but to isolate those into quarantine that might have been exposed. What we now know from COVID, and it's the science is continuously changing, is that the air droplets is a critical piece, right? So we know that those who are in that room, are breathing each other's air, and there's no way to get around that. But we can also try to make sure we have less interactions with others, and we can also try to emphasize outdoor play when weather permits. And again, depending where you're in the world, that's easy to say in certain times of the year and not others. But I think what we'll see is these certain types of techniques being used by most schools. How do we reduce the number of students during a given day? And this is through staggered schedules. This is through reduced class size. This is different shifts. And again, your context may change for that. But we're also going to see that we're going to try to limit movement within the building itself, and to be very conscious of knowing who is with each other, so that you can confidently say, this student or this teacher was with these 10 people and interacted with maybe just a few other people. We have closed down our staff room. We've tried to reduce movement. When people don't need to be on campus, we ask them to now go home. So we know it's a different pattern of how schools work. But here's the key piece, I would say, for those in the audience. We're talking about, as Henry was talking about this idea of connection between teachers and students needing to be very, very important. So the way I'm seeing this future is that we've reduced the students to a very few number of people, and that we're building a deeper connection. So less teachers, more connection, increased mental health. How do we create super tight teams now? Maybe these kids will be in this small group for the whole school year. Don't know what will happen when we go back for the fall. But if we're keeping these values that many of us are speaking about well-being, about teamwork, resilience, communication, then we're gonna really emphasize this. We're gonna boost this by keeping this very tight unit and giving the teachers the resources and the time that they can invest deep, meaningful work with those students, deep, meaningful conversations, so that as we move through this, we can help repair the damage of what has happened with the distancing and the mental health deterioration we see of most students. Anytime you get to the point of 9-10 weeks in lockdown, we can see this deterioration of mental health of teachers and of students. Now we're back. How do we rebuild those networks? How do we bring a deep sense of love and compassion back into that classroom, so that students can move forward and also deal with some of this trauma that was mentioned earlier about mental health issues that have happened during this time period. And one of the words I said when we came back, we have to treat all of us with tenderness in this new, this coming back to school. We're moving forward to school, as Henry notes. So the number of people who were incredibly scared, super high, of course. We had teachers who are in high-risk groups. We have students and families in high-risk groups. So how we're trying to serve them is important. And knowing that everyone's not ready yet. When school opens back up in your community, everyone is not going to be ready. What can we do to gently get them more ready as the weeks pass by? When we reopen again in the fall, that I can create more assurance, more compassion, that they're ready to come back, knowing that the risk will not diminish completely in the next year or so until we have a vaccine, if we're lucky.
And are the kids wearing masks? Are the teachers wearing masks?
Well, it's really interesting. Finland is an interesting place in Europe at the moment. Finland told the schools to not recommend masks for children. Finland is a country that is not wearing masks, generally speaking, at the moment. We're a country that is not very dense in population. People normally socially distance in their normal lives. So the number of cases has dropped dramatically, and the number of deaths is very low in Finland at the moment. Will there be a possible another spike? I think, of course, it's probably going to happen, and maybe they're going to change the guidelines. But I think, again, you're going to find that schools are going to be told all sorts of different recommendations around the world. We told students and staff, you're welcome to wear a mask if you like, if you're interested. Will they finally give us a recommendation that we all should wear a mask? I think it might be coming, but it's not here yet.
Okay, very interesting, because for most of the stuff that I hear from India especially is that you have to wear masks. I know that there are places that they've actually started fining people with a very heavy fine if you're caught without your mask on. So a
Yes.
very, very different, interesting perspective.
Yeah, in Germany, which is not that far away and very culturally similar, masks are required in public.
Right. And the official statement of UNESCO says that the decision to reopen schools is one of the most sensitive subjects on political agendas today. The priority must be to safeguard the health and the well-being of the students and to build trust. Trust is an extremely important factor here, and to communicate well with all your stakeholders, whether the parents, the children, your teachers. John, we have always taught children that sharing is caring. Now we are going to be telling them that caring is when you don't share with your friends. We are sending our children confused mixed signals. And children are children. They're going to run around. How do we maintain physical distance? How do we, I've seen some videos where in America, I think it was Montana, that they've got these hula hoops of 6 feet diameter. And the other ones, the pool noodles. And they use those pool noodles to put for their child, and that's how they decide how far they are. But I mean, children are going to be children. They're going to run around. How are you really going to take care of that?
That's a great question. I think, first of all, I just loved the comments that Kathleen made around that deep sense of love and compassion in the classroom and the tenderness. I think that's a beautiful phrase. And I think it's something that, within our school, we've always been proud of. The Italian culture is very different. And what struck me from when I first started working at the school was the fact that the children hug each other all the time. The teachers hug the children. It would be, it's not uncommon for me before all this happened to walk into a classroom and see a teacher plaiting a child's hair as they're talking to the rest of the class. And so, it's very much ingrained that that sense of care is about that physical touch as well. So it's something that we're going to really struggle with, I would say, in terms of ensuring this happens, because instinctively people just crowd together and like to have that physical contact. What we have been doing, though, is that we have a child study team that talks a lot about the implications of the whole coronavirus stuff. So from a very early in the lockdown, we were given lessons to parents about how to speak to the children. We've been given lessons to the children about what the reality really is. So giving them the vocabulary, putting the context to that as well. But we're also a school that talks about the learner profile. We're talking about our children being caring individuals who want to change the world. And so they already, as part of their action, part of their learning, think about ways in which they can show care for others. And during our activities, virtual classroom activities, every week we've been doing something around how to show care for others. Whether that is something simple like the rainbows in the windows, that was a big thing in Italy for a while. This week we just had, so we just shared it for next week. We have a Thank You for Caring for Us Day, which links with the UN's Parent Day. And for that, we're encouraging activities such as cleaning the living room for their family as a thank you for the care that they've had. Thinking about all the love and care that the people who look after them give them. Writing a poem or a song. Look at, if they're older children, looking after the younger children so the parents can have 2 hours of uninterrupted time together. All those things are kind of suggestions we have. So what the intention is that we will be having lots of conversations about how can we show caring and thoughtfulness for others, but not in that physical way that we normally do. So it's going to be it's going to be a big challenge, but our students are thoughtful enough and are critical inquirers in such a way that they will find ways to do this, although naturally it'll come hard to them.
Right. And John, what is that rainbow on the windows?
So there was, for a while, there was basically to show that there wasn't a fear of the virus, or that there was some sort of a hope to this. Children were put in on their apartment windows just pictures of rainbows, And the rainbows were basically just there to kind of go, okay, let's keep going. As a nation, we're going to deal with this lockdown and come through it in a positive way. It was kind of similar to the Italian singing from the balconies. That was a big thing that went around the world as well. It was more of a case of we're all in this together. This is a positive response.
Absolutely. The world is one big family. We have a word in a saying in Sanskrit which says Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which basically means that the whole world is essentially one family. Yeah. Robert, different countries have used different metrics to determine how to reopen their schools. Age is one of those metrics that a lot of countries are using. So India is one of them, where they're planning to, when they reopen schools in July, they're saying 30% of the students will rejoin, but only in grades 8 to 12. If you look at countries like Norway and Denmark, they use age as well as a metric, but they use the exact opposite of what India is planning. So they have the pre-primary is the primary. So up to grade 5 are the kids who are going to restart school and not the older kids. Why? Because they believe that younger children are less likely to benefit from online learning. So they open the schools for the younger children first. What's your take on it, and what do you think people in Slovakia would like? And what do you think as yourself as an educationist, is age the correct metric, and if so, then what age should children rejoin school from?
Yeah, I think that there's a whole load of reasons in there. And it just perhaps depends on which argument you follow. And also it depends upon your culture too, I think. So, for example, here, teenagers are a pretty independent bunch. So that means that parents can go out to work and kids can do things on their own to a certain extent. Whereas if you've got a younger child, somebody has to be at home with them. And here, for a lot of the cases, two parents have to work in order to make do. There's no extended family. Well, there is, but it's not. People aren't all living together so much. As my wife's Turkish, for example, in Turkey, the families are quite big. And so there's always someone at home to look after the small ones. So as people go back...
It's the same in India. India has that culture as well. Yeah,
that's right. Whereas here it's more people are living on their own. There's a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of small businesses, and people need to get out to work. Of course, I think it's right what you said also, that perhaps younger children, perhaps it's more difficult to give them independent things to do, perhaps. But maybe this is the time when we should be trying that out with younger children. But from our own experience here, the number of hours that kids started sitting at the computer all morning was pretty terrible. I just like to pick up on something I think John was saying about the things, the opportunities for developing that we have. So we've set a challenge to our kids to create a little video from 2 to 4 minutes, and they've got to give an inspiring message to say what do they want to take out of this experience that they want to take forward. So if they found that it was great that they became more organized, or that they were making cakes at home, or some of the kids were really thinking about their life and about school and why they did the stuff that they're doing at school, how are they going to keep that and take it forward? Because as we know, as soon as routines come back, suddenly all those good things disappear, all the great ideas. So how are they going to bring that forward? And then how would they like school to change, because of their experience? And how are they going to take that forward? And then also their community. A lot of really good things happened here with the community. People became more friendly. Bands started playing in villages and entertaining older people. And it was really good. The kids were amazed that our usually quite cool nationals here actually came out, and they showed the old warmth that they had. It was wonderful. So, and also the world. So getting them interested in what's going on in the world, I think what John was saying was great. Kids have got to know. And in the world, what do they want to see happening in the world? So it's what do they want to do, but also what do they want to see, for a better world. So I think it's really important that we take those things, like we get the kids to identify the positive things and work out how they're going to keep them later on. It's a little bit like habit forming, how am I going to keep this thing that I've learned going on? So, yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you, Robert, for that perspective. Henry, one of the biggest areas that keep school leaders, especially principals, head teachers, awake at night is that children's safety and security, especially inside the walls of the school campus. And today, of course, those walls of the school campus have become the walls of Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Hangouts or whatever other software that you're using for the blended learning. And what most don't realize is that a lot of the damage to the child's vulnerable minds happens through that 6-inch screen that they hold. In a day and age where nomophobia has become a condition, nomophobia is no mobile phobia. When you get anxiety or fear or tension or stress when you don't have your mobile around you, or when you wake up and your battery is at 2%. So when nomophobia has become this condition, how do we ensure that our children's virtual worlds don't overshadow their real worlds? And how do we keep them safe online? Because as children are digital natives, before they can learn how to write a word or a sentence, they can swipe their way to finding their favorite cartoon. They're born into this digital age. I mean, how are we going to make sure that they stay safe? And is it something incumbent upon us to make sure? Or is it something that we need to stop interfering so much and take a step back and let them grow up?
That's a really good question. And it's a question which has filled my life for the last 15, almost 16 years, when starting out as a police officer and then becoming a sergeant, having to deal with cases that involved Bebo and MySpace and school. So going very old school. The ability for kids to engage with technology has always been there. I think back to my own childhood and how I could program the VHS recorder before my mother or father could. Likewise, Rocco, now being aged 4, can pick up some bits of tech and use them without any instruction at all. I remember seeing him pick up a merge cube as part of an AR scanner at the Bet Show in London earlier this year, and suddenly be able to hold a solar system in the palm of his hand, age 4, actually no, age 3 at that point, and fully operate it. So the connection between technology and children, it has always been there. And for me, it's not necessarily the technology, it's the ability and the willingness of children to solve problems. And they have that freedom to be able to solve those problems, which can be a beautiful thing. Now, the problem for us as adults is obviously when we look at fear and risk perception, which tends to be developed by around about 27, 28 years of age, we can all see risk. We can all anticipate those problems that come through, which just isn't on the biological radar of kids that comes through, which when you then bring that forward to an educational landscape, both, for me, there's always a triangle. So it's the school, it's the parent, it's the child. And there is too much emphasis, I feel, at times for the school to have to solve the problem. And that's wrong. There is the 3 distinct points on that triangle that have to be part of that. As I mentioned, this has been my life for the last 15 years. And one of the aspects which I've always been acutely aware of is the role of the child in that mix. So quite often we always think, okay, well, it's the adults that have to respond to this, either as the educator or the parents, but we actually overlook the role that a child can play in helping to solve that problem. So through the work that we've done with e-cadets, which has benefited more than 1 million children, that's kids teaching kids online safety. And when you actually look at that peer empowerment, that peer leadership in conveying a message, kids will always listen to others as opposed to listen to us. They think we're all past it. They wonder, how on earth can we talk about technology? When my first computer was an Atari 2600 that had a fake bit of wood strapped to the front of it, they've got a point. Why should they listen to me? Well, they should listen to us because we understand risk. We can see where the pitfalls come about. We can see where situations could spiral out of control. Well, actually, for children, what they need is that landscape, that toolkit to go to be able to respond and handle certain situations. And that's very much where education, in terms of the 3 points of the triangle, does come in to help to create those opportunities where they can safely explore and safely encounter some problems, but then how to deal with that. One of the interesting things is through the work that we did with eCadets, which led us to Go Bubble, was exactly the point that you were saying, Ms. Sparrow, around, well, how can we look at this bigger picture of risk that exists? And a lot of it always comes down to behavior. So with any tech that's ever created, you can try and make it the best it possibly can be. And as soon as you put it into the hands of humans, humans will either break the tech or they will misuse it. So we've all seen, I'm sure, the well-documented stories that have appeared through news outlets about what's happened during the closures and platforms that have been used and content being put into it, which is inappropriate for children. For children, their main risk comes in two areas. So there's contact and there's content. So contact, are they contactable by grown-ups who they don't know? Content, are they seeing stuff that they shouldn't see? One of the biggest worries as a parent and as former law enforcement, now somebody who works in making the internet safer for kids, is that research has shown that 24% of children have been approached by an unknown adult through social media. And if anything, I think that figure's underreported. I think it's probably almost double that. So there is a global situation that takes place where children are at risk with regards to tech. So as opposed to it just being on the teachers and the education officers to be able to solve this, and then even with the parents and the kids involved, actually there's a huge emphasis here on tech. The tech companies, quite frankly, have to step up. And they've been, you look at the cases that come out, and the safeguarding protections that should be there and the safeguarding measures that should be in place that can be built into tech. And I know because we've done them, we've built them as a team, so I know they can be built. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, but you can do it. Then actually those should be in place to you then be able to create the safe environments for the kids to be able to use tech in a meaningful way. But a big bit isn't just enabling the safety aspect, it's also looking at the behaviors. So for us, as a mission that we have, we switch off at night, which goes against everything which tech companies tend to follow as a model, that actually you're stopping users use your platform. Well, actually, no, you should do, because sleep is important. You should step away from your device. You should go and get breaks. You should play, because that helps to a healthy individual. And also something which everyone has mentioned so far is kindness and empathy. And actually, how can you look at encouraging that behavior through tech? So the way that we do that is we actually reward kindness. We reward the likes that children give, not the likes they get. And I think that's really important when helping children understand the fear, the neurotic fear of not having a mobile phone or not having it properly charged, or how many unread messages have you got, is exactly right. And that is one of the biggest concerns that I feel is going to come out of this, is the digital well-being and the digital safety of the children. Unfortunately, may be a negative aftershock that comes through, particularly when schools return and issues then can start to come through the woodwork and start to be declared. So what can people do? Very much involve parents. Parents at times can almost abdicate some of the education to the schools, but actually there are lots of resources out there that parents can do. One of the things which I would always recommend is that parents can actually sit there and create a set of rules with the kids at home. But I wouldn't do it in consultation with the kids. What I always recommend is, as a parent, you have a sheet of paper, the child has a sheet of paper, and go off and write your own rules for using digital devices and what should they look like. I promise you, the child rules are far more draconian than you would ever want as a parent. They do understand self-control, they do understand self-measure, but by involving them in the discussion, they have that sense of ownership and they adopt it more, which is brilliant. It's then knowing, as either a parent or an education body or a teacher or a principal, is knowing where to look for resources that you can rely on. So there are lots of different websites out there, but some which are really good for helping to signpost people to resources that they can go and use, some which are free to access, I mean like GoBubble, but other ones that are free to access that there provide that option. For the education organizations themselves, what we're starting to see increasingly now is digital forming more of the safeguarding assessments, as opposed to it being a different tranche for digital safety and e-safety or online safety. Is actually it's starting to be written in more and more into the risk assessments for schools around safeguarding, and not just the reporting of what happens if a situation comes up, but actually being proactive. You know, how do we look at which platforms are safe? How do we look at what we can and should use? And as a little sort of quick time-saving device, and time-saving measure, I would always recommend to a school, if you're looking at using a platform and it's an app, or if it's web-based, just check when it was last updated, because tech companies and tech organizations working with schools should be updating their tech, if not monthly, monthly as a minimum, ideally fortnightly or weekly, because behaviors change, pressures change, security risks change. And if you value children, you value safety and doing the best that you possibly can, you should be putting out regular updates. And you can easily see this in the App Store. You can see when the last app was pushed out. With websites, again, there are ways of checking when the last update went out. We do the updates weekly. So I would certainly say, involve parents in it, do that home rule, get the kids involved, look at the kids as their peer leaders. That's always a good route. And then just look at the safeguarding checks within the school on when the tech was last updated. Hopefully that answers.
Absolutely love the idea of having the children as peer leaders, because a lot of times adults don't want to instill the confidence and belief and faith in the child. They feel that, oh my God, how will the child manage? How will he do this? How will he do that? If you don't instill that confidence and faith and belief in the child, of course he won't be able to do it, because you're not setting him up for success. You're setting him up for failure. But if you do allow the child, maybe he'll stub his toe. So what? He learns something new. That's what resilience really is. Yeah. I was noticing a lot of questions coming in on the comments of Facebook and of Zoom. I'll try to take some of them, as many of them as I can. There was a question on Well-Meaning Fridays. There's a question on screen time. But the first one I'm going to ask is more about, again, the school reopening. And there was a poll that revealed that 60% of Americans are not likely to send their children to school when schools reopen in the fall. Now, what happens when you don't have 100% attendance? You have half the kids who are coming. What happens to the other kids learning? Do they continue just on an online platform? And really, what is the motivation behind opening schools? For a lot of, is it motivated by the fact that until you open schools, parents can't go to work, and until they can't go to work, your economy doesn't restart? So is that sort of the leading motivating factor, or and how do you really tackle the fact that parents are not ready to send their children to schools, or even teachers? There was a poll in America that said that 1 out of 5 teachers will not go back to school when the schools reopen. Kathleen.
Yeah, and I think we saw all those various factors that you mentioned with our reopening. One of the pieces that we worried about was who would come back, how many would come back, and what do we do about those students? So most schools don't have the capability to keep both systems going, full virtual and full contact teaching. So we did put in some provisions to allow some pieces to keep going for those who couldn't come back to school. For example, for those who were in a high-risk situation at home. And we had to reassign staff to allow that to continue. But we know it's not sustainable unless we have a whole virtual online staff at our school, which we don't. So that was one piece. I would say that there's going to be a big difference will be the confidence people feel as if it feels like it's ready to go back. There is an incredible pressure from parents to return to school due to their ability to go back to work, at least where we're at. So we have felt that very early on, and this is a pressure that's coming from not only the national government to help people get back to work, but also from parents. And the surprising piece we have found is that the longer we're back in school, the more the parents want everything to go back to exactly normal like it was before. So you're all going to find at some point this incredible pressure that everything's okay now. Let's just go back to exactly like it was 6 months ago, which I don't think we ever can go back to. So there's no going back to some normal in this situation, but you're going to feel different pressure than you expected. When we all went to distance learning, the pressure of keeping everyone safe was incredibly high. Now that we're coming back, we can see that the more we're with each other, the more lax people get. We have to remind ourselves about social distancing and taking care. And we haven't even been back that long. So that's an interesting development. I think it's coming for many of you, that you'll get this pressure like, we can go back and it was all perfect back then and we need to return to that. For the safety of the community, it's going to be dependent on how safe it is in your country or in your community as well. So if there's a pressure to go back and the curve hasn't flattened or things have not reduced, I think you're going to see an incredible pushback from teachers and from families not to return to school. Because there's that economic push will be there from business people, from parents who need to get back to work. But there is going to be a pressure to return too soon. One of the reasons that Finland was very adamant about coming back for just 2 weeks, because we actually end school this week. So it was from May 14th to now, and we're ending in our normal time. We start very early here. We saw that there was over time, there were more and more students whose learning experience declined over time during distance learning, and that we saw a high rise in children who were in situations of neglect and of abuse, and that there was well-being worries. So one of the ideas with bringing back students was to get eyes back on those kids. How are they doing? What's happening? What was happening at home? Because although in an ideal situation, home is a loving place, we all know around the world that's not always the case. So there was safety issues to bring students back so we can see what happened. Are they okay? And we saw a very high rise in again, issues of abuse that you see around the world, alcoholism, a rise in alcoholism during the time period. And this was the condition students were in, and they stopped going to classes, they stopped being online, we lost contact, so how do we bring them back as a society? So I think, though, that when we do bring back, if you are in a limited situation, you can only be in contact hours a couple days a week or 1 day a week or whatever your society decides. The most important thing is not to lose the opportunity to connect for well-being as your only priority, not the academic, we're going to make things up. Oh, they got behind in math or something. Like, put that all aside. That's not important. What's important is eyes on kids, reestablishing connection, giving the children time for social play, at any age. We decided for our older students, we created much longer breaks between the classes so they had time to re-engage. We did a lot of stuff outside where they could, talk to each other in a relaxed way. We don't have to worry about the situation as much as in a room. And I think we're going to find that the reason we go to school in the future, in the next 5-10 years, is not because of the academics. All that can be flipped. All the content and all this stuff changes, right? We're going to be going to school because we need to connect as human beings, physically connect as human beings in some way, whether we can hug each other, or not. We need to be near each other to feel good. And we may find that school's number one purpose is socialization, social play, connecting as human to human, teacher to teacher, teacher to student, community to the whole community. And so I would say don't discount. If you can only open for an hour once a week for one class, you're going to see that class is going to benefit dramatically from that when you get to that point where it becomes safe enough for that. And I don't know where, each society, as the COVID is around the world, there's, very low points for most societies, and then hopefully a return to more normal like we saw in Italy or in Finland. So hoping wherever you are in the world, your country is heading towards the better numbers. And that when you do have a chance to reopen, that you're focused on well-being.
Right, absolutely. And that's what education is, not a transactional phenomenon. It isn't about transacting curriculum. At its most fundamental basic sense, education or teaching, learning is simply about the human relationship.
Yes.
And in a world where the human relationship is, or the human contact, or the oxytocin spread, so to say, is discouraged, the socio-emotional learning of children is definitely going to be dented. John, would you like to share your thoughts on how do we build socio-emotional learning in this new post-COVID world?
I think it comes down to, again, the focus on the humanity of schools, and the word. We're a medium-sized school where we are, and we still talk about the family. The school is a family, and sometimes there's a worry that we use the word without really thinking about what that actually means. I think part of the whole social care part is sharing, not only giving people the chance to talk, but also to be sharing the struggles that you're doing as well. I think what I've loved about what I've seen the teachers do through all the time through this time and before as well is sharing their struggles, not in a way that burdens the students, but basically going, do you know what, I'm having these problems as well, and this is what I've tried. Do you know what, I'm not always as sparkly as normal because it's hard for us as well. And by talking about your own troubles as well as your strategies, it then takes that loneliness away, as it were, as well. And I think, I get the sense from the way that the teachers have worked is that they are all finding their way together. And I think that's really important, rather than looking at the teacher to fix it all or those sorts of things. I think there are some kind of aspects. Our children, our students, our young people are so resilient anyway. Yes, they need help. Yes, they need support. But for instance, when we did our Wellbeing Fridays, we talked about the 5 parts of 5 ways to well-being, came from the New Economics Foundation, very, very well known. But I launched straight into, okay, I used to run a wellbeing program in the past. I know what to do. And then the leader of our student council said, why are you doing that? Why can't our students do it?
What happens, what happens on Wellbeing Fridays?
So we have a variety of activities. So basically there's 5 pillars. So there's connect, so connection with others. There's being active, keeping learning, giving to others, and taking notice. So, something around kind of mindfulness, doing things for others, finding new things to learn. Those are the 5 aspects. But our student council, so from the age of 6 all the way up to the age of 14, they actually create the activities each week for the students. And I have to say they're much better activities than the ones I would have given. And also they're more popular, which is slightly upsetting, but there we go. But the point being is that they, it's their realities as well. So, as long as, as long as we as long as we feed them what they need to be fed in terms of research or in terms of activities or whatever, they'll come up with their own solutions in a better way, I would say. And I think for me, that involvement of the students is really important in terms of that care, involving that social awareness and caring as well.
Right. We have about 10, 12 minutes left. So quickly, I'm going to ask Robert and Henry a few more questions. Robert, I gift you a time machine which takes you 1 year ahead. What do you see in the school around you, on your school?
What would I like to see?
What do you see? Okay, both. What would you like to see and what do you see? Both.
Right. Well, I would like to see the teachers, all of the teachers, some of them do already, all of the teachers have this buy-in to implementing, creating, identifying opportunities in what they teach to develop these learner attributes that John was talking about, to develop these things, because we still have teachers who go to teach subjects, not teaching kids, and I know that's not so much perhaps in our schools, in international schools, but it is in state schools. So I'd like to see that, not just in my school, but in other schools. We're actually talking, I have an organization, a non-profit organization. We're actually talking with people here to change the mind of the state schools, change the approach to education. And so I'd like to see the approach change, the approach in developing these holistic learners, as I say, the people who can cope with these issues, who can be relied on to look after themselves. I know there's a lot of controversy in Britain, for example, where the Prime Minister has said you've got to have awareness, you've got to be aware. Well, in a way, I agree with that. We have to become aware. And so the sort of guidelines that are given to us, we have to adapt them. We have to be aware enough to adapt them, right down to the student level, the learner level. And so what I'd like to see is far more communication and connection between all of the members of the learning community, and in fact our community to be a learning community where we're all involved and we all take responsibility. And we take responsibility, not we're given it, but we take it. So there's an development of intrinsic responsibility to solve problems, to point things out. And we're beginning to see this. So our director, he sent out the regulations, and I was so pleased when some of our students said, hey, what about this? So they had the confidence to question the director and to say, look, you've forgotten about this, haven't you? It was really good. So I'd like to see this, to see schools becoming learning organizations where all the members in those organizations have the vision of going towards one thing, which is helping young people become sustainably self-developing learners, and learners for life, not just for school. So.
Absolutely. It's like that, there's a joke that you go and ask a child, so what is the answer to this? And he's like, I don't remember. He's like, why don't you remember? It was in your test yesterday. He's like, yeah, you told me to remember it for my exam. I remembered it for my exam, but my exam's over now, so it doesn't matter. So,
Exactly.
Final $1 million question to Henry. Henry, the age-old debate about screen time, and a lot of, especially now because of the blended learning or phygital or a hybrid sort of learning that's happening, kids are now in front of their screens, listening to their teachers virtually for hours. Sometimes schools are doing it for 3 hours, 4 hours. I've heard schools have the normal regular day, so 6 hours of sitting in front of a screen. And what's your take on screen time, and is quantity of screen time the only debate, or is it the quality of screen time or the engagement of the teachers' pedagogy equally important? What's your take on screen time?
Yeah, definitely. I'm conscious that we don't have much time for me to answer about screen time. For me, it breaks down into a couple of key areas. Firstly, it's very much about quality. So the historic debate was very much around quantity, and then it shifted pre-COVID and even more so now around actually the quality. So if children are simply sat there and repeatedly streaming videos or playing games which don't have a clear pedagogical benefit, well, are they really getting the same amount of impact and of quality that they will from a session with a teacher for the same duration? Well, quite clearly no, because the use of the screen is different. So it has to be very much focused around the quality time and the quality of the impact. I suppose looking at it, in terms of, for a child sat in front of a screen for 6 hours, would I do that now as a parent? Well, no. I wouldn't do it for myself, let alone expect my child to do that. Screens have a benefit, but they are there simply as a tool to either enhance a session or for some aspects during COVID to facilitate a lesson. But they should always be used in moderation, in my personal view. The ability of a screen is a great information source. As you exactly say, you say it was the joke about the exam. I was relating it to my own childhood. I used to remember things for exams and then forget them straight away. Nowadays kids have got Google. So why are we having to teach them certain things that they can go off and Google? Actually, let's look at the interaction with screens can they help and support some of the key skills that we've been talking about so far. And I believe they can, but in moderation. And there is an enabler. It's really important for our own health, our own well-being, our own mental health, that we take time away from screens. And I can't overestimate that enough. For me personally, 9:30 at night, every device goes off, everything. I then play Lego. So it's like, no, I'm not a salesperson for Lego. I'm not plugging them, but that's what I do. Because it's important to have that time away. It's important to take regular breaks, literally step up, walk around, close the screen off. If you can, where you are societal, go for a walk or just walk into a different room, just have a change of scenery. Give yourself that time to digest, to let your eyes reaccustom, to hydrate, everything that it would, that human common sense would teach us to do, we have to do. I think there can be pitfalls to having sort of end-to-end lessons constantly streamed, which don't have appropriate breaks in. And obviously that's down to individual educators, individual schools, how they wish to do that. All I can ever talk about is from my experience, and breaks are incredibly important. And I would always look at less time in front of a screen versus more. And I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, tech companies have a role to play in that as well. They can put measures in, like we have, where we switch off. But also it's important to educate people as to why it's important to step away. And I think as everyone today has touched on, the well-being of a child, the well-being of us as a human family is very much around connection and community. Part of that can be enabled through screens, but a big part of that actually is face-to-face interaction when we are able to do it, when it's safe for us all to be able to do that, and to do that in acceptable ways to protect the health for us as individuals, but more importantly, to protect the health of the communities and the families that we're part of.
Absolutely. Can't agree more, Henry. In summary, just to close up, I think there are 5 very important key takeaways that I have kept, at least made notes of. And I think the first one is resilience. All of us have agreed upon that resilience is a key factor that is there inside each one of us. Maybe it's dormant, maybe it's hidden, but it's adversity that brings it out. and elicits these talents within us. So resilience, but not only amongst us as adults, but for our children. Our children are far more resilient than we imagine or give them the credit for. They are way, way more resilient than we are. Kindness, compassion. There is nothing more important in this world right now than kindness and compassion. To whether it's a person who has got the virus, to somebody who you know, please do not stigmatize that person. Kindness, compassion, love is the thing that binds us all together. The child being at the center. Can't agree more. The children are at the centers of our universe. They are the reason why we exist. We do what we do for the children, and we spend all our time, effort, everything is all about the children. So let's put faith, belief, confidence in them, and let's see them blossom. They will. That's the nature of a human brain, of a child's brain. Fourth is that we're all one family. Crises like these make us realize how it doesn't matter where you are in the world, whether you're in Montreal, Milan, Mumbai, Melbourne, or Helsinki, or Chester, or Milan, or Bratislava. We're all one family. We're all going through the same problems, the same conditions, and we all have that one thing that we all have to keep on hanging on to is the hope, which is the fifth key takeaway. We keep hoping, we keep staying positive, we keep staying confident rather than letting the anxiety, fear overcome us, rather than letting the negatives defeat us. We need to realize we are very strong. We have overcome difficulties in the past, and we will continue doing so with great confidence and positivity. So as school leaders, parents, government officials, and students, stay positive, stay safe, stay strong. Wish you all the best. Thank you to the wonderful panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.